Welcome everyone to tonight's Ordinary Council meeting. I am the Mayor of Brimbank City Council and my name is Georgina Papafodio. This is the last council meeting for 2019. I declare this meeting open at 7 p.m. In the unlikely event of an emergency, please follow the direction of council officers and the emergency procedures on the wall near the door. I would like to note that I've given approval for the journalists from the Brimbank Star Weekly and Channel 31 to audio and video record the meeting. Members of the gallery are not intended to be recorded, but please notify a council officer if you have any concerns. I note that there are a number of members of the public in attendance for tonight's Ordinary Council meeting. The purpose of a council meeting is to conduct the business of council in an orderly and constructive manner. While council obviously becomes community interest in council meetings, a council meeting is not a community consultation forum. Members of the public are not able to address council at this meeting tonight or disrupt proceedings. Item 1, please stand for the Acknowledgement of Country. On behalf of Brimbank City Council, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land, the Wurundjeri people, and pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. Please take a seat. I ask councillors to remain standing for the council commitment. As a council, we will act in the best interests of the Brimbank community and consider the immediate and long-term impacts of our decisions. We will make these decisions fairly and without bias. We will uphold all of our obligations under the laws of Victoria and Council's local laws, and we will act in accordance with our Code of Conduct. Thank you. Item 3, apologies and leave of absence. I note Councillor Congreve is on leave of absence from the 7th of November to the 16th of December 2019. Item 4, disclosure of conflicts of interest. Are there any declarations of conflicts of interest, councillors? Thank you. Item 5, designation of items as confidential. There are 2 items to be designated as confidential this evening. May I have a mover of a motion to designate these items as confidential? Councillor Goodchair, could you please state the motion?
As printed in the business papers. Thanks, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Trung. I will put the motion to a vote. All in favour? Against? Carried. Item 6, confirmation of minutes of previous meetings. May I have a mover for a motion to confirm the minutes of the previous council meeting? Councillor Borg, please read the motion.
I'll move the motion as per business papers.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor David. I will put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Against? Carried. Item 7, condolences. There are no items of condolence this evening. Item 8, congratulations. There is one item of congratulations this evening. This congratulations is for Mr. Peter Thomson for the Vicroads licence testing facility. May I have a mover of motion of congratulations for Mr. Thomson? Councillor Hedditch? Thank you. May I have a seconder? Councillor Trung. Councillor Hedditch, would you like to speak?
Would indeed. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Tonight we stand here congratulating Peter Thomson. Peter has been a long-term community activist in the Brimbank area, but in this particular instance, he has put a couple of years of his life into, I guess, advocating for the Vicroads licence testing facility that was in Sunshine to remain in Brimbank or in the inner west. And Peter carried out that function really solidly. Peter was the man behind the petitions, the man behind the megaphone, the man behind the, gathering together of the network of people who were providing learner driver services in the area to support the need, as well as local residents who had young families, and in particular, but also others who needed to obtain driving lessons locally. As everyone knows, the office was closed eventually, and people had to travel to Broadmeadows, Melton, Wyndham and Geelong to get a licence testing facility. Peter, I guess in the work that he did around the community here, got us together and got us supporting him. And we got out there and, we had the megaphone, the much maligned megaphone. We had the signs that Peter and his crew all made up that were, some of them a bit inappropriate, but what the heck, we were campaigning. But I think we also learned as a council, we'd come out of transition from the administration and we weren't quite sure about how to do all this. And Peter asked that we put a petition on the desks of the council offices around town, and that was a bit of an issue. We had to go through that and learn from that. And there were various things that happened that helped us transition, but we also learned as a council that we were able to get out there and be active with community and to respond to local issues. So Peter put an enormous amount of time and effort into it. He got in touch with Neil Mitchell regularly, he got in touch with politicians, he got in touch with people everywhere to try and get an outcome. And Parliament had a couple of questions and points made by various MPs, and Peter was there behind them all the way. And Peter, in the end, we know that Vicroads now has proposed to put a licence testing facility in the Debenham area. So tonight it's all about saying thank you for all that effort, all that contribution, and I think the value that contribution has made to the City of Brimbank. Well done.
Councillor Trull, would you like to say anything?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I just would like to add in some from the councillor had it already. We all know it. Peter Thomson is very hardworking for the community, and yes, I did be with you when you take this action, and I'm very pleased you can carry a lot of different ethnic people from different community to stand beside, and I think all the hard work that you is being recognized by all the members in the community, especially for the young people. It's a need for the test for the license, and today the successful with all the hard work from you is being recognized. Is it not only the people from the council, but I think it for a lot of members in the community. I'm very happy with the result we get. Once again, congratulations.
Thank you, Councillor Trull. Would anyone else like to speak? Councillor Tarkos.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would also like to personally congratulate Peter for turning up time after time and taking an interest in this very important issue and overcoming his own barriers to run a very successful campaign in advocating for Vicroads to retain the licence testing here in Brimbank. No one can deny Peter's passion for Brimbank and also for equity. That people and kids in Brimbank get a fair go and access to a service that was unfairly taken away, leaving a huge gap in a needy community. A licence is more than a piece of paper. It's access to jobs, to independence, and to the young people, apprentices, etc. They're just starting out in their jobs. They need a car, they need a licence. No one can underscore the importance of a licence and access to testing. He also cared for the driving instructors, many of them coming from court backgrounds. They turned up at every single protest. Their jobs were on the line and they had mortgages and they were supporting families. So for me, it wasn't just about retaining the licence testing, it was also supporting people in our community that relied on those jobs. Peter Thomson's campaign exemplifies how one person, activism and voice, can make a difference. People sometimes decry activists as being disruptive, but sometimes it's the only way to make an important point, that equity and fairness matter. Thank you, Peter, and keep up your great work.
Councillor Farm.
Thanks, Mayor. I don't know if you know how much it means to our community, especially to people who never been working with you Peter to come and, join you in, supporting the work that you have done, but also for themselves, while advocating not just for our young people, but for our new, migrant as well that need to be starting and building up their life in Brimbank. Is it an effort, and also is a cost saving for our resident not to go, double the distance to get their license testing, not only the distance, but also the cost that they have to put in to have their license done. So thank you very much for, being out there with the community and advocating for our own community. Thank you.
See, anyone else, councillors? Well, thank you, Peter, for your hard work and time. Obviously, it's appreciated by all and definitely recognised, so thank you again. We're up to item number 9, public question time. We've now reached the part of the meeting for public questions. Just for anyone unaware, public questions are able to be received in writing by noon on the day of the council meeting. We are unable to accept any public questions from people in attendance on the night. If someone who has submitted a public question is unable to attend the meeting, we will make sure we respond in writing within 5 business days. Mr. Sakurai, I understand we have received questions from the public this evening.
Yes, Madam Mayor, we have. The first question is from Mr. Ramsey. Mr. Ramsey, are you in attendance?
No?
Madam Mayor.
Okay. We will write to Mr. Ramsey responding to his 2 questions.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The next question is from Mr. Margaritis. Hello, sir. Good evening. The question from Mr. Margaritis is, if the proposed north-south runway is given the green light, who is going to be responsible for the slump in property values within the Brimbank municipality, particularly the suburb of Keilor? Will the council reduce rates accordingly? Who is going to noise-proof our homes and schools with insulation and double glazing? Will the council acknowledge the potential serious health risks to your ratepayers, schools, aged care homes and medical facilities, particularly all those residing close to or under the intended flight path? Who is going to cover the cost of medical treatment?
Thank you for your question. Approval of the new north-south runway will be a decision for the state and federal governments and will involve Melbourne Airport updating their 2018 master plan and preparing a major development plan. We understand that Melbourne Airport will be required to prepare a health impact assessment as part of its major development plan for the new north-south runway. Tonight, we will be considering a motion to write to the airport to ensure that the results of this study are made public so that we can assist our residents to advocate for proper mitigation outcomes.
The second question from Mr. Margaritis. What is the council's position on the effects of PFAS chemicals, which have already decimated all the market gardens along Arundel Road and which will only get worse with time? These chemicals are known to be carcinogenic, refer Professor Martin Kirk, ANU New South Wales, re Oakey Catherine and Williamtown Defence Air Bases, thus destructive to humans and to the local native fauna, which we were meant to protect and preserve. Will council acknowledge that the affected suburbs were established long before Melbourne Airport took out the long-term lease on land in Tullamarine?
Again, thank you for your question. Council acknowledges the legacy and ongoing PFAS chemical concern and is actively engaging with landholders in the Keilor Market Garden area and with stakeholders including Air Services Australia, Melbourne Airport and the EPA. In October 2019, Council wrote to the EPA, Melbourne Airport and Air Services Australia to detail the concerns of landowners, which included poor communication, a lack of progress in implementing the National PFAS Management Plan and an absence of financial assistance to affected landowners. there will be a further meeting between stakeholders and landowners in either late December 2019 or January 2020. We will continue to advocate on behalf of our residents who are impacted by PFAS.
The next question is from Mr. Bacon. Mr. Bacon, are you in attendance?
Sorry, you can't direct any questions. You will receive a response in writing, Mr. Margaritis, and you...
didn't acknowledge that last line, the last question I asked about...
We will respond to you in writing, and if you've got any questions, please contact us. Thank you. Thank you, you will. Thank you.
The next question is from Mr. Bacon. In light of Melbourne Airport's recent decision to try to extend its operations with an additional north-south runway, belching aircraft exhaust fumes over the densely populated Brimbank area, is the Council aware of a recent study by the USC and the University of Washington that found high levels of exhaust particles from jets using LA International Airport? The particles are concentrated in flight paths as far as 16 kilometres from the airport. Researchers are alarmed because the minute particles, less than 1,000th the width of a human hair, can travel to the lungs and other vital organs via the bloodstream and spread to the brain.
Thank you for your question, Mr. Bacon. Council is unaware of the study. However, we will review and consider matters relevant to the Melbourne Airport proposal when the major development plan for the new north-south runway is released. As stated earlier, we are also seeking an assurance from the airport that the result of the relevant studies will be made public so that we can assist our residents.
Second question from Mr. Bacon. Melbourne Airport's decision to construct an additional north-south runway will have a devastating impact on the health and well-being of the residents of Brimbank. The constant battering of jets taking off will by far exceed 90 decibels, not to mention the health implications from the ultra-fine particles in the exhaust fumes. Will the Council be installing a noise monitor under the existing flight path less than 4 kilometres from the south end of the existing runway, so they can make an informed decision on how the new runway will affect the health and well-being of their constituents? And if it is found to be detrimental, will the Council lodge a formal protest with state and federal governments?
Mr. Bacon, Council has written to Air Services Australia regarding the need for a noise monitor in Keilor and will also consider advising the need for additional noise monitors associated with the new north-south runway if they are not already proposed for installation by Air Services Australia. Melbourne Airport is required to undertake consultation about the major development plan and update to its 2018 Melbourne Airport Master Plan. Council will be submitting to Government as part of the statutory consultation process. Thank you.
The next question is from Mrs. Robertson. Mrs. Robertson, are you in attendance? Good evening, ma'am. Mrs. Robertson's question is, what has Council's understanding been of what noise abatement procedures have been in place for Melbourne Airport from 1990 to the present time, since the runway configuration changed from 2 separate pairs of runways to 4 crossing runways, and how those procedures are currently and have been enforced?
Thank you for your question. Noise abatement procedures are designed to help reduce the impact of aircraft noise on communities. While they are applied whenever it is possible to do so, their use is not mandatory and is subject to weather conditions and traffic requirements. The noise abatement procedures apply to the current configuration of 2 runways. The approval and oversight of noise abatement procedures occurs through Air Services Australia, who can provide further information.
The next question from Mrs. Robertson. When were the suburbs of Brimbank affected by aircraft noise developed, and what, if any, planning restrictions or regulations were in place at the time they were developed, given their proximity to the airport?
The Airport Environs Overlay, which is the AEO, and Melbourne Airport Environs Overlay, the MAEO, are the planning controls used to limit noise-sensitive uses and the impacts of aircraft noise on development. The areas where these controls apply are determined by an airport's forecast aircraft noise exposure contours. The ANEF is included within approved airport master plans. The MAEO Schedule 1 and Schedule 2 apply to areas of Brimbank including Keilor, Keilor North, Keilor East and Calder Park, and was introduced in 2007 and applied the 2007 ANEF.
The next question is from Mr. Gorman. Mr. Gorman, are you in attendance? Evening, sir. The question, Madam Mayor, is mental health is emerging as one of the most significant issues in our society. One of the protective factors is overcoming social isolation, particularly where older men are concerned. Brimbank Men's Shed for many years has provided a place for local men to gather, eat a meal, go on outings and enjoy a welcoming place of acceptance. Funding for the shed coordinator has now run out. What is the commitment of Brimbank Council to funding such positions as the Brimbank Men's Shed coordinator, or alternatively working with community groups to seek funding through, for example, Vic Health and its Healthy Masculinity Grant?
Thank you for your question. Council has an ongoing commitment to men's mental health and wellbeing, which includes supporting the Westvale Men's Shed at the Westvale Community Centre. Council officers are available to meet with representatives from the Brimbank Men's Shed, auspicing organisation to discuss opportunities for supporting the Brimbank Men's Shed, and will follow up with them shortly.
The next question is from Mrs. Jennison. Mrs. Jennison, are you in attendance? Good evening, ma'am. The question, Madam Mayor. Does Council have any records, research of health and noise impact studies for residents living south of Melbourne Airport? This is not related to the new proposed third runway. It is related to the health of people now.
Thank you for your question. Council does not have any record of health and noise impact studies that are specific to residents living south of Melbourne Airport, as studies that are location-based or related to a specific land use may be commissioned, and usually by state and or federal governments. We understand that the Melbourne Airport will be required to prepare a health impact assessment as part of its major development plan for the new north-south runway.
The next question is from Mr. Yurkov. Mr. Yurkov, are you in attendance? No? The question after that is from Mr. Peter Thomson. Evening, sir. Brimbank Council has been promoting the fact that they are a community-first council since elections just over 3 years ago. You have also been promoting the fact that it is open and transparent to the community. If this policy is still continuing, could you please tell me why the questions are no longer being read out if the person is not present at the meeting when they have been for the past 3 years?
Thank you for your question. Brimbank's meeting procedure allows the chair to determine not to read a question if the person who asked the question is not in attendance. If that happens, the person receives a written response to their question. This allows us to respond directly to people who attend council meetings, and it assists the chair manage the timing of the council meeting. All accepted questions appear in the minutes of the meeting. This means our community can always see the questions asked of council, regardless of whether or not the question is read out at the meeting.
The second question from Mr. Thomson. How can Council allow an 11-storey building to be built so close to the Sunshine Leisure Centre, as parts of the outdoor pool and also some houses in Kennedy are going to be overshadowed at certain times of the day? Surely this should be limited to protect the leisure centre and also residents.
This question relates to a matter that is on the agenda for consideration at tonight's meeting, and therefore it would be inappropriate to respond at this time. Councillors will be required to consider all aspects of the proposal when determining the application.
The next question is from Mrs. Farray. Ms. Farray? Evening, ma'am. Why has Koski Street Sunshine West not going to be finished? It is being refurbished at the moment, but only half. It should be done as a whole street together. We have waited a long time and won't take no for an answer.
Thank you for your question. The roads or sections of roads selected to be rehabilitated each year as part of Council's road rehabilitation program is based on a survey of all council roads completed every 3 years. Please note, Council does not always rehabilitate the whole length of a road as it depends on its condition. The section of Koski Street between Cranbrook and Corowa Streets was included in the current 2019-20 Capital Works program based on its condition and priority within the entire municipality. At the time of the survey, the other section of Koski Street between Corowa Street and Killara Street was assessed as having a better road pavement condition and was not included in the Capital Works program. However, I have been advised that while this section of Koski Street is not part of the current road rehabilitation works, Council is planning to undertake works in this section next financial year, subject to the final 2021 budget. We anticipate that it will include new curb, channel, road surfacing, vehicle crossings and associated works. Thank you. Okay, we're up to item 10, petitions. We can't accept any questions from the gallery. Pardon?
It's been sent and received.
You can't direct any questions to the... When did you send it?
About 9:30 this morning.
9:40. We'll follow up with that and get back to you. We'll have to follow up with that and get back to you tomorrow. We apologise for that. There is one petition to be received this evening. Under the governance, meeting procedure, local law number 1, at an ordinary council meeting, petitions may only be received and referred to the CEO for consideration. Councillors, that means the substance of the petition itself will not be considered or discussed this evening. 10.1, pedestrian cycle connection from Stradbroke Drive to St Albans Road via Debenham Drive, St Albans. May I have a mover of a motion to receive the petition in relation to pedestrian cycle connection from Stradbroke Drive to St Albans Road via Debenham Drive, St Albans? Councillor Borg.
I'll move the petition as per the motion as per business papers.
Thank you for that. May I have a seconder? Councillor Farm. Would the mover like to speak to this?
No.
All right, I'll put the motion forward. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Item 11, minutes, reports of special committees. There are no minutes or reports of special committees. Councillors, I seek to change the order of business to hear the notices of motion directly before the officer's report. All in favour? Thank you. There are two notices of motion this evening. Councillors, I remind you that a notice of motion must be moved as printed in the papers, and only if seconded can an amendment be moved. Okay, our first one, 13.1, is supporting sustainable practices for Brimbank businesses. Councillor Trull.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I move the note of motion as printed in agenda paper.
Thank you. Are there any questions or points of clarification, councillors? Councillor, would you like to move your motion?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Hedditch, does the mover wish to speak to the motion?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. As the portfolio councillor for the sustainability petition of sustainable practice and in transition to allow a low carbon circular economy for Brimbank business community is an important topic. Council currently practice environment upgrade agreement to unlock finance option for business seeking to upgrade their facility with energy and water efficient improvement. While successful, the environmental upgrade agreement program to generally limit of large business that own their own property and focus exclusively for energy and water efficient and alternative only. A broader program focused on small to medium enterprise with the total assistance option is required to empower smaller business in Brimbank to take the sustainable practice and access opportunity in the low carbon circular economy. For example, we have 1,289 food permits registered in Brimbank. This includes 117 restaurants, 185 takeaway shops, and 160 cafes, plus a variety of other food permits. More programs are need to be encouraged. More sustainable business practice may include localized process of organic and recyclable, replacement of single-use plastic, and disposal with suitable, routable alternative, energy and water efficient audits and advice, collaborative procurement of suitable goods and services, microgrids of renewable energy projects. The benefit of well-designed, sufficient resource program would be include new revenue opportunity, reduce of operation overheads, enrich marketing potential for local business, opportunity for bulk of procurement and financing, opportunity for training and skill development, opportunity for networking with industry leader and innovator, opportunity assist for partner with Victorian government body and funding and assistance to develop business program focused on SMEs. Every day, there are a lot of small things that business can do to help their customer be more sustainable and less wasteful. I have just example like one of the restaurant, it can yield up to 5,000 takeaway content per month, and some special time they may be double that. Plastic food pots and trays are often unrecyclable. Most of the plastic food containers that householders wash out after use and put in the recycling bin cannot actually be recycled. It has emerged. Only thirds can be recycled. The rest it will send to the landfill. Takeaway food tent includes a lot of packaging and unnecessary waste, such as the plastic and polystyrene container, single-use plastic bag, napkin, and disabled dinnerware. Add delivery to your takeaway, and there may be admission of subsidies with the transportation. Take meal from home or have your food to stay at restaurant to avoid unnecessary takeaway with packet. You can also bring your own content to pick up food up. So I have some of the sample. It's like show and tell.
You've got 30 seconds, Councillor.
Okay. It's like maybe when I go to work, I always carry the reviewer, this one, and I carry it if we can support the business to carry for the customer can use, and this one, it can be reused in take of you the plastic container.
Councillor,
Yeah.
time's up.
Yeah.
Would you like some extension
Yes,
of
Madam
time? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Thank you. So that is what can be reused and let have less rubbish to be in our landfill. We have a lot of problem. You all remember it's a few months ago we had the problem about the recycle. So that's why I say it bring out glass and plastic container, metal store and container to leftover or yield be waste to cotton prop. Woodbine with bling prop, dry substitute of glass in case of plastic content in your leftover. If you must buy plastic bag, buy toothpaste from recycled plastic and remember to put your curbside in recycle out loose. So packet of essential medium for present the food quality, minimize food and waste and reduce the preventive yield in the food. The packet server is the important function to content of the food, protecting against chemical and physical damage while they provide information essential for the consumer and marketing. So within a small chain, add up to a big chain when we all make shift to a more suitable way of living and given the time of the year is a perfect opportunity. When I say, dear Santa, all I want for the Christmas is the reusable container set for some reusable container for shopping. If I support by my fellow councillor,
20
it is not
seconds,
a motion.
Councillor Truong.
Yeah.
20
It
seconds.
look forward to receive the report from officer in the new year. It pay my comment for this not of motion. Thank you,
Thank you,
councillor.
Councillor Truong. Does the seconder wish to speak to this notice of motion? Do I have any other speakers for or against this motion? I will now put the motion to a vote. All in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Item 13.2, Melbourne Airport 3rd Runway. Are there any questions or points of clarification, councillors? No? Councillor Tarkos, would you like to move your motion?
Madam Mayor, I'd like to move my motion as per business papers. I'm happy to read it out, but it's on the screen. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tarkos. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Hedditch? Does the mover wish to speak to the notice of motion?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, I bring to yours and the Chamber's attention that there is a causal relationship between levels of environmental noise exposure and health outcomes. And particularly its impacts are on vulnerable populations as evidenced in the nHealth review evaluating over 200 research papers and publications and policies from 1994 to 2014. Right now, our Brimbank community is pondering the impacts of noise exposure, what they will be if the proposed north-south alignment goes ahead. I know that the community in my ward and outside my ward have been talking to me daily and are expressing questions, concerns and feel somewhat powerless and are looking to council and to their other political leaders for leadership. They are also looking for a critical assessment on the existing framework for noise mapping, noise control, and to foster a national a framework that has consistency, adherence on guidelines that are backed by legislation to minimise and limit noise and the methods that set noise limits. The north-south alignment will have significant impact on Brimbank, particularly in Keilor, Kealba, Sunshine North and parts of Sunshine, but of course it will go right through Brimbank. Other areas of Brimbank are already impacted by aircraft noise associated with the current runways, including St Albans, Keilor Downs and Keilor. Council is concerned about the potential health impacts of increased aircraft noise on residents, particularly at night, as we have no curfew. Council is also concerned at the potential impacts on learning environments for Brimbank's student populations at schools located within the areas affected by current and projected aircraft noise. Our council has endorsed its submission to the draft Melbourne Airport Master Plan for 2018. The draft master plan at the Ordinary Council meeting of the 18th of September 2018, where we identified the following outcomes are sought from the draft master plan. That Melbourne Airport acknowledge its role and responsibility in addressing noise. The need for improvements to noise compliance, complaints and handling practices. The need to address noise abatement procedures, particularly nighttime noise and noise sharing. Ensuring an appropriate network of environmental monitoring units, EMUs, including an EMU based in Keilor. Improve information about noise and engage with affected communities in Brimbank in relation to the short-term noise impacts during the time of the third runway is intended to be constructed. A recent study into the health effects of environmental noise by the Department of Health, Federal, found that there is a causal relationship between environmental noise and both sleep disturbance and cardiovascular diseases to warrant health-based limits for residential land uses. That further investigation was required in relation to environmental noise and its association with poorer cognitive performance and health impacts on vulnerable groups. And that research on the health impacts of environmental noise in the Australian context should be a priority. It is important that any future work properly considers the health impacts of increased aircraft noise on residents here in Brimbank. A key way to understand aircraft noise is through appropriate placement of noise monitors. Air Services removed the noise monitor located in Keilor Village in 2016. Air Services said that the location was not beneath the flight path. However, it is apparent that not all noise monitors are beneath flight paths. Keilor Village is already impacted by aircraft noise, and the removal of this noise monitor means that Air Services has no means to measure this impact. It is imperative that a noise monitor is located in Keilor Village as soon as possible so that the aircraft noise impacts on Keilor can be considered.
Councillor, you've got 30 seconds.
Consultation with the Brimbank community is of paramount importance as well. Council is keen to understand how Melbourne Airport will communicate and consult meaningfully with Brimbank residents, and that engagement is appropriate for our culturally diverse community, where in many cases English is a second language, but not everyone also has social media. Noise mitigation measures.
Councillor, would you like an extension
Yes,
of time?
please.
I'll allow 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Noise mitigation measures, including noise sharing through airspace design, noise attenuation and other approaches, have been adopted in communities surrounding other Australian and international airports, such as Sydney, Brisbane and Adelaide. Air Services Australia need to be more transparent and open in assisting the local communities understand what options are available and considered best practice here in Australia, but also internationally. Council recognises that Melbourne Airport provides a considerable social and economic benefit to our community and communities, including Brimbank, and that it has an important economic driver for Melbourne, Victoria. However, it is also important that Melbourne Airport is a good neighbour. and addresses and mitigates the amenity impacts on their growth and the surrounding communities. It is important that Melbourne Airport continues to work with our council, our people, about these amenity impacts and provides further information about the findings of the review of the proposed east-west, I should say north-south alignment to the council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tarkos. Would the seconder like to speak? Thank you, Councillor Hedditch.
I commend Councillor Tarkos for a notice of motion and the presentation she's given to Council tonight. For me, I affirm what Councillor Tarkos has said. The airport is an important provider of services in this community, but it is one of many in this local western region at the moment. Alongside it we have the Essendon Fields Airport, and to the south we have the new Avalon International Airport. The Melbourne Airport has operated for a long time in this area, and residents have been noticing aeroplanes going overhead for a long time as well. I think we're noticing at the moment there's been some changes in the last 6 months, and the level of noise and the level of transport across this particular community has been considerably higher, it seems, but we aren't able to access a whole lot of data about that. Melbourne Airport also operates with its licence from the federal government, but it operates with a social and environmental licence that basically puts it in touch with its community. That issue of social licence was brought up in the recent Banks Royal Commission, where the Royal Commissioner advised the banks that social licence was important and that it needed to be managed. In this case, I think Melbourne Airport also needs to manage its social licence, as it has started to do with its consultations with community and has been doing with its engagements with Brimbank Council. But I think there's a whole lot more it needs to do as well. Again, with the environmental licence, and that's another factor as well. For me, I think the conversation that's just been had about the need to know brings to mind me the point that was made earlier about adding after a secondment. And I would like to add 2 points regarding the use of the Explain app in this community. The Explain app is an app that local residents can use to measure the level of noise of a plane as it crosses their house. It identifies the plane, it identifies the exact geographic location, the suburb, and all that data is transferred off to the app, and the app gives back information about every suburb and what's going on in terms of noise decibels, whether it be from 50 to 70 to 90, whatever it is, and aggregates that up. So it's really useful material. It's been used in European countries of late. Rotterdam and another German community, I think, has also picked it up, and I'm suggesting tonight that we have an amendment in addition to the notice of motion, point C, that Council promotes the Explain app to the Brimbank community.
30 seconds, Councillor Hedditch.
Yes. So can I also seek an extension while I get through this bit? That promotes the Explain app to the Brimbank community to enable people to measure and submit their individual aircraft noise results to the app.
Thank you, Councillor Hedditch.
So can that be added?
Can we add, we can't change the notice of motion. Yes.
No, to add a point C.
Do we need to pass this first? Okay. Would you like to move the amendment motion now?
Yes, please.
Part C?
Yes. So I'll read it again.
Yes, please.
The Council, C, promotes the Explain app to the Brimbank community.
Is she writing? Yep.
To enable people to measure and submit their individual aircraft noise results to the app.
Put it back to the move. Next to accept it.
Sorry. Okay. That people. Sorry. To enable people to measure and submit their individual aircraft noise results to the app, APP. They then collect the data and report on it and send it back to community.
Thank you, Councillor Hedditch. Because we've got an amendment motion, we need to have a seconder for the amendment motion. Councillor Goodachare. She can speak to that. Councillor Goodichy, would you like to speak?
Yes, Madam Mayor, just simply to
Thank
say
you.
a few words that I thank Councillor Tarkos and I also thank Councillor Edich for that. The Explain app is something that I will be installing as well. However, I also thank the residents for their concerns, for their attendance this evening. Council is engaging with Melbourne Airport and Air Services and indeed the federal government and will continue to do so. We will be seeking information for community benefit. And I suggest, Madam Mayor, that in your travels, now that you are going to be visiting some ministers and some federal members, I would suggest that this be high on the agenda so that the federal members can actually bring the concerns of this community straight to Canberra. I'd also suggest that the residents might actually want to make an appointment with their federal member too and perhaps tell him of their concerns so that he can take it directly to Canberra as well. I think that would be most fitting if the residents would do that. It's always good if residents knock on the federal member's door and they get it straight from the horse's mouth. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Absolutely, Councillor Goodichy. Any other speakers for this amendment motion? Councillor Allen?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to start by saying that, of course, I support this motion. I think it's important to allay residents' perceptions that councils just sit and idly by while the North-South Runway proposal moves forward. I mean, Brimbank Council is working with the Melbourne Airport through the Memorandum of Understanding, of course. We recently had another confidential meeting with the Melbourne Airport about how the North-South Runway will affect residents, and another one is planned early next year, so just a few months' time. I can say with confidence that all residents' concerns are being discussed and represented, are being represented by all councillors and staff at these meetings, and even outside of that. We're currently trying to understand the implications, both directly and indirectly, and this notice of motion will help contribute to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Does anyone else wish to speak to the amendment motion? Councillor Lancashire.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I too and councillors and council staff were at that briefing session, and might I say it did afford all of us the opportunity to question the airport on why the decision was occurring, and question them in significant detail, of which we certainly afforded ourselves the opportunity to do that. They showed us various wind diagrams and other things which helped to explain at least their position on the matter, and that was important. However, I think what it does show is they've made that decision, and we now need to focus on the noise attenuation measures that have been proposed in this. And as such, I'm supporting this amendment as put forward, because I think we are focusing on the issues that are now before us to have to deal with this. So it's just a quick comment to say I support it, and I support the new focus on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lancashire. Any other speakers for or against this amendment motion? Okay, I will now put the amendment motion to the vote. All in favour? Against? Carried. I declare the amendment motion to be the substantive motion. Thank you. Councillors, I've been told I now need to put the substantive motion to a vote. So, all those in favour for the substantive motion, please put your hand up. Against? Carried. Thank you. Now, this brings us back to item number 12. Officers' reports. People in the gallery, if you would like to leave now, you're welcome to leave. Thank you for attending tonight. Thank you. Item 12, Officers' Reports. There are 14 Officers' Reports for consideration by Council tonight. 12.1, Planning Activity Update and Delegate Decisions, November 2019. I invite our Director, Calvin Walsh, to briefly introduce the report.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is a monthly report to Council on the status of planning permit applications and trends in planning approvals in Brimbank and decisions made under delegated authority during November 2019 regarding planning permit applications and other matters. Council is asked to note the planning activity update and delegated decisions November 2019 report and delegated planning decisions that are outlined at attachment 1 to the report.
Thank you, Kelvin. Councillors, are there any questions or points of clarification? Is there a motion? Councillor Lancashire?
Through Madam Chair, move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for this report? Councillor Goodichere. Councillor Lancashire, would you like to speak? Councillor Goodichere, would you like to speak? Anyone else would like to speak to this report or against this report? Okay, I'll put it to a vote. Those in favour? Against? Carried. 12.2, Planning Application P287/2019 for number 1 Wood Street, Deer Park. I invite Calvin Walsh again to briefly introduce this report. Thank you.
Thank you again, Madam Mayor. This report is for Council to consider an assessment of the planning application for the construction of 7 dwellings, that's 2 double-storey and 5 triple-storey dwellings at 1 Wood Street in Deer Park. The officer recommendation is that Council issues a notice of decision to grant a planning permit for the construction of the 7 dwellings at number 1 Wood Street, subject to conditions that are outlined in the papers at attachment 5.
Thank you, Kelvin. Are there any questions or points of clarification, councillors? No? Do I have a mover? Councillor Hedditch?
I wish to move an alternate motion.
Okay. Do I have a seconder for the alternate motion? Could you please read the alternate, please?
The alternate motion is the Council issues a notice of refusal to grant a planning permit P287/2019 for the construction of 7 dwellings, in brackets 2 double-storey and 5 triple-storey, at 1 Wood Street, Deer Park on the following grounds. 1, the limited landscaping opportunities throughout the site, including tree canopy cover, fails to compensate for the contribution the increased density and built form will make to the urban heat island effect in this existing residential area. This includes the greater site coverage, building surface area and demand for any energy consumption of future residents. 2, the proposal will result in a reduced amenity for residents in the area through increased traffic, appearance of the built form and lack of landscaping opportunities.
Thank you, Councillor Hedditch. Would the seconder like to speak to the alternate motion?
Only to support the impact of the lack of canopy of trees not complying with the standards of D10 landscaping of clause 580305 of the Brimbank planning scheme, and will also exacerbate the urban heat island effect, and that it would also create a result in overlooking and privacy issues for the patrons of Sunshine Leisure Centre. Thank you.
No, wrong one. Okay, Councillor Tarkos, would you like to speak to number 1 Wood Street? Who was the seconder?
She should have offered the opportunity to withdraw the second.
Okay, Councillor Tarkos, I offer you the opportunity to withdraw the last statement.
I would like to withdraw the last statement. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Now, do I have a seconder for the alternate motion?
Seconded.
Councillor Goodichere, would you like to speak?
Speak first.
The mover did speak, didn't he? Oh, no, sorry. I apologise. Councillor Hedditch, would you like to speak to the alternate motion?
I would indeed. Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, everyone. I guess for me this particular issue is one that has come up regularly during the course of the life of this council. We have a continuing debate going on regarding the impact of, I guess, lack of what we see as lack of landscaping opportunities in residential growth zones and activity centres, and the impact on the local neighbourhood of the heat island effect as a result of not enough tree canopy or greening in those particular zonings. In this particular case, the proposal is for 7 dwellings, 2 double-storey and 5 triple-storey, but with limited canopy down the sides of the building and with the occasional tree here and there. The assessment has been that the building complies. I think there have been a number of assessments that have come through in recent times like that, and for me the question is not so much the work of the officers, it's the impact of this particular proposal, and we as councillors have to take into consideration, as we said in our commitment tonight, the long-term impact of our decisions. For me, the long-term impact of this decision will be a building that emanates a whole lot of heat, will produce very little in terms of cooling effect, and will contribute to the heat island around the area as the residential growth zone grows and the population increases. The station, we know at Deer Park, will continue to expand, and the traffic and amenity around that station will continue to grow. This is 1 block away. For me, therefore, the particular aspects of this particular site are that there is a detailed landscape plan required potentially as a condition of permit. For me, I would like to be able to see that detail at this point in time for residential growth zone matters and activity centre matters, because we don't have a clear idea of what benefit could be coming from those landscape plans without that detailed plan in front of us. We see in the assessment that there have been a number of trees proposed, a couple of trees proposed that may grow to a height of between 8 and 13 metres, and we see that the building bulk visually impacts adjoining dwellings, and a vertical landscape screen should be provided, but hasn't been as yet. So for me, I feel that this particular matter does not do enough in the landscaping area, and it does not do enough to convince me as a councillor trying to run my eye over this with the long-term benefit of the community in mind, that heat island effect will not be lessened, but I think potentially increased as a result of this particular development, and that concerns me. We have a whole lot going on around us in the external world. We can acknowledge that, but we can't deal with it with our responsible authority hat on in terms of that external action that's going on around climate change and urban heat island, but we can deal with it in considering individual matters that come before us. And for this one, I don't see how urban heat island is going to be minimised, how the thermal particulars of this particular area are going to be enhanced, and I think that the overall plan does not do benefit to the community in that sense, that we have a very poor outcome in terms of lessening of heat island effect. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hedditch. Councillor Goodachir, would you like to speak to this?
Yes, Madam Mayor, thank you. I do absolutely agree with the refusal. I seconded it, even though it's not always the norm that you second and then you don't agree. But anyway, I do agree with the refusal. Whilst the officers have certainly done their jobs in assessing this application, and I know that it meets all the clauses of Res Code, but sometimes as councillors, we need to wear our hearts on our sleeves, and I do see it as an overdevelopment of the site, and I do see some traffic amenity issues arising from this development. Perhaps a lesser development would be more appropriate for me personally. Having been out there and stood there next door to some of the residents that are going to be perhaps experiencing this development, I would say that personally I wouldn't like to be living there, and that's all I can say. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Goodachir. Any other speakers? Councillor Allen.
Just to say I support that, and one only has to look at the street and look at the area and know that it is a massive overdevelopment, and I don't think it's appropriate for the area.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Councillor Borg.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I also support the amended motion and express my concerns as expressed by Councillor Hedich and Margaret Goodjay and Councillor Allen. There is a concern regarding the reduced amenity for residents in the area through increased traffic, and also the urban heat island effect is also concerning. As already mentioned, the council officers have done an excellent job in this, but as we said, we need to look at the bigger picture and see how it is affecting the residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Farm?
I also speak in support of the alternate motion, and not only concerning about the heat islands issue, but also the traffic that impact on the local street, the parking issue, and also the rubbish collection issue that embedded into that little space. So that's why I also, not to say too much, but a lot of, like many of our councillors or, community can see that's going to be probably an issue if this go ahead. So I fully support the alternate motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have any other speakers for or against? Councillor Lancashire.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I noticed the numbers. However, I'd like to make some comments against the motion as put forward. It is the officer's advice that the proposal achieves a high level of compliance with policies, strategies, standards and objectives contained within the Brimbank planning scheme. The state section of the Brimbank planning scheme provides a high level of response to climate change, although there are no specific clauses about the heat island effect. There are no clauses specific to heat island effect in the local section either. The site coverage and landscaping objectives were considered as part of the Brimbank housing strategy, Home and Housed, and resulted in the schedule to the 3 residential zones having varied requirements, with lower site coverage and additional canopy trees required in the neighbourhood and general residential zones, but higher site coverage and fewer canopy trees required in the residential growth zone. A previous VCAT decision for a development within the residential growth zone, 52 Helen Street and Albans, considered the issue of heat island effect. The member noted the issues about impacts of the heat island effect are addressed in the local policy and expressed in Schedule 1 to the residential growth zone. It would be inappropriate to require more of this proposal than what the residential growth zone anticipates, and I have applied the strategic framework accordingly. If the application was to be refused, it is likely that an appeal will be lodged at VCAT, where Council would seek external representation. Such representation would result in a cost to Council which has not currently been budgeted for. Accordingly, I don't support the proposed amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lancashire. Any other speakers for or against? Okay, Councillor Hedich, you've got the opportunity to respond.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I acknowledge the contribution by all councillors. In response to Councillor Lancashire's contribution, I would make the point that the objective of this particular area that I'm putting forward is that the landscaping objective is to encourage development that respects the landscape character of the neighbourhood, and it is to provide appropriate landscaping. And also in the numerical requirements, where new building bulk visually impacts on adjoining dwellings, a landscape vertical screen should be provided. I would contend that this particular proposal does not meet those objectives. The assessment is that they do, but I think when we see the plan and we see the around the 1 metre length of, planning out down a driveway, that, in my opinion, with my councillor hat on, does not do enough to limit heat and does not provide enough canopy cover to limit heat going forward in a climate where we are seeming to get hotter and hotter days and more wind and drying. It does not provide enough, vegetative bulk to make a contribution to lessening heat island effect in the area. So I think I take on board all the points that have been made. They are all good ones, but in my view, this particular proposal
30
does not
seconds,
meet the
Councillor
objectives.
Hettich.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I'll now put it to a vote. Those in favour of the alternate motion, hands up please. Against? All right, it's carried. Thank you. Item 12.3, application P520/2019 for the ending of Section 173 agreement P672695L at 6 Thorpe Street, Sunshine. Could I please invite Kelvin Walsh to briefly provide us a report? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The purpose of this report is for Council to consider whether the Section 173 agreement related to 6 Thorpe Street in Sunshine can be ended. The officer recommendation is that Council agrees to end the 173 agreement that is registered on title and in the report at attachment 3.
Thank you. Are there any questions or points of clarification, councillors? Do I have a mover? Councillor Hettich, a seconder. Councillor David, would the mover like to speak?
Yes, Madam Mayor. This is one of the bigger sites around Sunshine. It is quite a huge site, in fact, on the southern side of the railway line. And the site in question here that's being that we're agreeing to end, hopefully, will be one that brings to an end the, I guess, the connection of the Britax factory. That was the area where their office was located and so on. It makes no sense now that all the buildings have been demolished to leave it like this. It makes all the sense in the world to bring the titles together and to develop it as a whole. I understand there's an environmental audit going on at the present, and somewhere along the line Council will know some more about what's intended for this site. But it's a fabulous big site and it makes all the sense in the world to bring the two titles together. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hettich. Councillor David.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, indeed, and the whole factory, I remember well that I think the owners or perhaps the people involved with that factory, they were in a hurry to demolish it before the heritage came about. It had a bit of a history. It was a factory making prams for late babies and all that type of thing. But look, as to the report before us tonight, I think it's worth doing, as I say. The area wants to have something built there, and I think it's to me it's an extremely good report before us, and I support that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor David. Any other speakers for or against? Okay, I'll put it to a vote. Those in favour? Against? Carried. Item 12.4, planning application P879/2016 for 15 to 19 Service Street, Sunshine. Could I please ask Kelvin Walsh again to
Of course,
brief
Madam
us?
Mayor, it's a
Thank you.
pleasure. For Council, the purpose of this report is for Council to consider the assessment of the planning application, as you mentioned, for the development, use and development of the land for an 11-storey mixed-use building at 15 to 19 Service Street in Sunshine. The officer recommendation is the Council issues the planning permit for the use and development of the land, including the 11-storey mixed-use building and the retail premises on the ground floor, as outlined in the report, subject to conditions that are included at attachment 5.
Thank you, Kelvin. Are there any questions or points of clarification, councillors? No? Do I have a mover? Councillor Lancashire.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I would like to move that this item be deferred. Thank you.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Hettich. Does the mover like to speak to the alternate motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, in terms of this planning application, I do have a number of concerns. I'll specifically keep them in relation to the officer's recommendation and condition 4, which relates to the provision of social housing by the development. The concerns are that the developer owner, under the wording of this condition, appears to be able to determine who gets low rent, and I think that is inappropriate and could involve possibly even nepotism without proper mechanism in place to regulate this sort of occupancy. Now, I think that's we need to have that clarified. In terms of the need to discuss with the developer as to how this system will operate, should involve independent, not-for-profit group qualified and experienced in providing this type of housing. Important that the owner be at arm's length from prospective occupiers. This I think is a fairly sort of obvious point of view. This application has been dealt with very differently to the Foundry Road application, where social housing was provided for, which was this application appears to be based on not affordable housing, affordable housing issues rather than social housing issues. The condition that was put into place for the other one, which we need to really compare with because there is a commonality between the two, a net community benefit in the form of social housing must be provided by a registered housing provider and or agency registered with the National Disability Insurance Agency, NDIS, to the satisfaction of the responsibility and set aside for the use as a social housing in perpetuity. So again, if we look at that condition where social housing was dealt with because the building exceeded our height requirements, here it exceeds our height requirements, and we are dealing with in what seems to be a very different set of circumstances. It is unclear why we have a completely different approach to this application as against the earlier application. So it's for those reasons, and there needs to be very much a strong probity issue in how this operates, and a clear understanding from Council how it operates. I request Council defer this motion for further discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lancashire. The seconder like to speak to the alternate motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I stand to talk about deferral also, but for very different reasons. I don't have the same issues that Councillor Lancashire has. I think there's a very good affordable housing system working through the planning scheme and through various councils at the moment, and I accept that. My reasons are different. I have, I think, discussed with officers and others the merits of this proposal, and one of the merits is the contribution to affordable housing, and it's a very solid and terrific application generally. My concern is heat island effect and the, I guess, the long-term impact of making decisions like these on an individual basis, case by case, and the cumulative effect of that on an activity centre and the residents who live and work and recreate in this area. So I want to know some more about that, and there's some other issues I've also put through to the officers in the last 24 hours that I'm waiting for further responses on. So for me, I support the deferral, but for different reasons. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hedditch. Do I have any other speakers for or against this alternate motion? Okay, I'll put it to a vote for the alternate motion to defer this. Those for? Hands up high, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Against? 3. It's carried.
Madam Mayor, may I have my name recorded against?
Same here.
So are you asking for a division or just your name to be recorded against? And Councillor Sam David and Councillor Goodicce.
Recorded in minutes, Madam Mayor.
Yep, Thank you. We don't need to go to... Okay, thank you, councillors. Item number 12.5, the Governance Report, December 2019. Could I please ask Director Dan Hogan to please brief us on this? Thank you.
Certainly. Thank you, Madam Mayor. The monthly governance report is a standing item within the ordinary council meeting agenda. It is a summary of recent governance activity in accordance with best practice and good governance principles. Written in compliance with the Local Government Act of 1989, the report variously informs council of delegated decisions, outcomes of previous council resolutions, or seeks relevant decision for action. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Dan. Are there any questions or points of clarification, councillors? Do I have a mover?
So moved, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Goodichere.
As printed in the business papers.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Allen. Would the mover like to speak?
Simply to say, Madam Mayor, as Mr Hogan has said, it is a monthly report and it does deliver reassurance on the way we conduct our governance. It does provide ongoing transparency and accountability to our community. This month does include a wide range of important reports, including the records of assemblies of councillors, of which there were many, delegates and representative reports, again, of which there were many, contracts entered into in accordance with the S7 instrument of subdelegation, and this month the exercise of delegated authority to the CEO over the holiday period. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Allen. Are there any other speakers that would like to speak for or against this report? I'll put it to a vote. Those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Item 12.6, Fraud Policy and Protected Disclosure Report. Could I please ask Dan Hogan to brief us on this report? Thank you.
Thank you again, Madam Mayor. Council is asked this evening to consider and adopt 3 documents which form part of Council's Fraud and Corruption Prevention Framework, namely the Draft Fraud Prevention Policy, the Draft Public Interest Disclosures Policy 2020 and attendant Draft Public Interest Disclosures Procedure. I commend the report to Council.
Thank you. Councillors, are there any questions or points of clarification? No? Okay, do I have a mover for this report? Councillor Heddich, a seconder. Councillor Borg. Councillor Heddich, would you like to speak to this report?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I congratulate the officers on a fine piece of work. It is really important that we have these policies in place to prevent fraud and corruption. As we know, most people around, well, most people have zero tolerance of this, and I know that most people that I know in Brimbank community are the same, that people do not want to see fraud and corruption in any way or form. For me, we've been having some discussions about this lately, and it has been a real talking point. There's a lot going on outside this council that has been in the papers and so on, but this is about the policies and procedures council is going to put in place to prevent this, and it is so important that we do prevent this. Brimbank Council has, unfortunately, over history had a...
That's enough, Councillor Heddich. That's becoming personal.
It's not personal. I'm not reflecting on any councillor.
I'm sorry, I'm not accepting it.
Fine. Brimbank Council has, I think, here done a fine piece of work. Brimbank Council has had a number of discussions about this, and Brimbank Council has, I guess, a strategic risk if this is to happen, like any council does. It is a strategic risk for all councils. Strategies like a zero tolerance culture, strategies like a prevention effort, strategies like education and training of all stakeholders involved in this, and I guess other strategies that can help with this prevention and management of a strategic risk are really important to this council going forward. So I think that this is a great piece of work. It's something that should be applauded and supported, and I think that as council we can strengthen it further by thinking about strategic risk and the strategies we need to put in place to support it going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Heddich. Councillor Borg.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As a local government, it's imperative that we maintain the highest ethical standards. It's important that council officers, councillors, providers, and volunteers make themselves aware of the council's code of conduct and all other related policies. As one of its principles, council has a zero tolerance to fraud or misconduct. Through this policy, council will have a mechanism to implement procedures to facilitate investigations of allegations of fraudulent and corrupt conduct. Through the corporate risk management framework, council continues its commitment to the mitigation of fraud and misconduct. It's certainly a great piece of work, and I congratulate the council's officer on developing this document. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ball. Any other speakers for or against this document? Okay, I'll put it to a vote. Councillor Goodicci? No, I'll put it to a vote. Those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Item 12.7, Quarterly Portfolios Report. Dan Hogan, could I please ask you to brief us on this? Thank you.
Indeed, I will. A regular report that is submitted for Council to note the activities of the various portfolio meetings occurring within each quarter. This report concerns the reporting period of September to November 2019.
Thank you. Any questions or points of clarification, councillors? No. Do I have a mover?
So moved, Madam Mayor, as printed in the business papers.
Thank you, Councillor Goodicci. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Tarkos. Councillor Goodicci, would you like to speak to this report?
Yes, I will, Madam Mayor. As the Portfolio Councillor for Brimbank Innovation, which does include governance, I would like to acknowledge all the councillors and officers who have embraced the councillor portfolio system, which has just completed its second year of operations, and a special thank you to Hilary Hastings for championing that. The purpose of the portfolios is to complement and support Council's briefing and formal decision-making structure. A diverse and wide range of issues has been discussed at portfolios in the last few months. Indeed, 58 presentations or updates were delivered, including advocacy priorities, creating opportunities for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander engagement and performance at the St Albans Community Centre and Bowery Theatre, the Brimbank's Festival and Events Program, the Economic Development Strategy 5-year Implementation Plan update, the Climate Emergency Plan, which we are about to discuss later on tonight, the Integrated Finance Transformation Project, which Madam Mayor delivered a lot of freer hours for our officers just simply by using software that we already had and saving some time for our officers to spend more time on more important projects. And in a first for portfolio meetings, a site visit where all councillors were invited to learn about our local grasslands and fauna in situ. And I'm afraid I missed that one because I was on leave, so I think that I will be requesting another one next year. I'm sure that I have much to learn about local grasslands and fauna. But thank you very much. Well presented by all councillors when we have our portfolio updates amongst us ourselves, and it keeps us in the loop with what each councillor is doing in their portfolios. I think a very, very worthwhile thing the portfolios were. Everyone knows that I was a little bit sceptical in the beginning about portfolios, but I've come to embrace them myself, and I certainly look forward to working once again in my innovation portfolio in the next 12 months. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Goodicci. Councillor Tarkos.
I attended that grasslands tour, and I have to say it was pretty spectacular, and I got to saw grasslands that I didn't think existed. So I guess with portfolios, it's given us that opportunity to cross-pollinate, and as Margaret Giudice said, we are able to learn from other people's portfolios, just as everyone attended the Transform portfolio presentation to learn about our advocacy. I've had the honour of working in the Resilient portfolio for the last two years, and I can say that I'm very committed and will continue with vigour to advocate for our council, who's embarked on and is committed to building a resilient Brimbank for the whole community. And we, along with you, Madam Mayor, will continue to represent our community's best interests and with dialogue with our local parliamentarians, our state, federal and important stakeholders to help build, transform Brimbank in key areas of transport integration, environmental justice, education across all ages, the Sunshine Super Hub, and the list goes on. Just an example is our last meeting with a local state parliamentarian. We were able to bring up a environmental issue that is very pertinent at the moment at the Kialba landfill. So the portfolio enabled us that opportunity to broach a couple of important issues with that parliamentarian. We will continue this good work into 2020 and hopefully the new decade. Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you. Any other councillors that would like to speak for or against? Councillor Borg?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As the People Portfolio Councillor, I would like to highlight two presentations of the drafts of two strategies, namely the Draft Children's Strategy 2020-2024 and the Draft Brimbank Youth Strategies. One of the actions in the draft Brimbank Youth Strategy is the establishment of the Brimbank Youth Council, and this will be starting next year. These two strategies will be presented to Council in February 2020. Another presentation that I want to highlight was about a program called Brimbank Dads, and this was quite a highly successful program which ran for 12 months, and it was funded by the Victorian Government, Office for Women and the Department of Health and Human Services. The project also aligned with Council's efforts to prevent family violence and violence against women. Unfortunately, the funding is now came to an end, and as a council we will be looking for opportunities to see if we can get the funding to continue this program. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have Councillor Hedditch?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just briefly, in the Prosperous Brimbank portfolio, I just wanted to inform the community that we had an iHarvest update. iHarvest is upstairs on the 4th floor, and it's a great spot for startups and young entrepreneurs, old entrepreneurs, to come and work on a part-time basis or longer, very affordable rates. The iHarvest project kicked off about a year ago, and I'm pleased to report that it's been very successful. It has done very well, and it is attracting new groups of people by the week. So it is a real compliment, I think, to Council for its vision and its leadership in this space, and that it has had an impact, a really positive impact, and I can only say good things about it. All I can say to the community and to councillors generally is more strength to iHarvest's arm. It is starting to do its job, but we need it to really kick a lot of goals going forward and perhaps be looking at doing other things into the future. The second point is around the Brimpact project. We had an update on that. It's a fantastic project for young people to basically partner up with organisations that have opportunities that they are offering to take young people on board, and that particular initiative is being run by a group of young people with high energy who are out there and ambassadors plus, and they're really getting amongst it. So I have every confidence that Brimpact will be a success. It will get young people into work, and boy do we need it. We have a head of steam up around this, and I congratulate Ms Brackett and her team for that. They've done a great job identifying the issue, and we have a whole lot of talk going on now about social procurement, about all these big infrastructure projects coming through. But as we learned in our trip to Canberra, we have to make sure that the frameworks are robust and the measurement methods really strong. But Brimpact provides us with great potential and a great opportunity going forward, and I have every confidence that it will be successful. The last thing I wanted to talk about was that we also had a discussion about the community engagement for community vision for major infrastructure
Councillor Hedditch,
projects.
1 minute.
50 seconds to go? Yeah. Thank you. And I think that exercise has also given us some fantastic overview material to feed into the particular initiatives that are going to go on through the Western Rail Plan and various other infrastructure investments for all of Brimbank. I think the community now, there was a discussion in Sunshine over the weekend is looking forward to being able to contribute ideas positively into the upcoming opportunities to be able to put forward a vision for particular pieces of investment as they come along. And so they're looking to get together and strengthen the community voice around these projects and to make a real contribution in partnership with Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hedditch. Councillor Farm.
Thank you, Mayor. So it's the councillor who are in Vibrant Portfolio, I want to bring to the table the excitement of our future of the festival and events that we're going to do in the future is we're going to bring up the 6 months calendar of events that those events have been funded and we're going to promote it. Another very exciting things that I want to bring to the table is out of nowhere, I just have suggestion that we have the indigenous artwork in the chamber, and can't believe at this day it coming to real life. We have spoke about it, have planned, and have also decide what we're going to do about it, and looking forward to see it in early next year. So thank you.
Thank you. Do I have any other councillors? Okay, I'll put it to a vote. Those in favour? Against? Passed. Okay, item 12.8, Solomon Heights Precinct Land Use Planning Options. Could I ask Kelvin Walsh to present a brief report, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The purpose of this report is for Council to consider the land use planning options for the Solomon Heights Precinct and to endorse the preferred approach. The Solomon Heights Precinct comprises 32.8 hectares of land zoned Industrial 3 in Sunshine North. It has remained undeveloped and unserviced since the 1920s. Council has prepared an analysis of planning options for the precinct, and Council is asked to note the Solomon Heights planning options summary at attachment 4 to this report and endorse options 1 and 4 as the preferred pathway forward. Council is also asked to write to landowners within the Solomon Heights precinct about this report, including details of Council's decision this evening.
Thank you, Kelvin. Councillors, are there any questions or points of clarification? Do I have a mover for this report? Councillor David, a second. Thank you. A seconder? Councillor Allen. Councillor David, would you like to speak to this report?
Just very briefly, Madam Mayor, this is to me an issue we had for as long as I remember. I grew old with it, and I hope to God one day we have some happy moments about it, and the rest of the ownership there that have been waiting for a long time. And recommendation is quite okay with me, and I support it. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor David. Councillor Allen? No, do I have any other speakers? Councillor Hedditch?
Just briefly, Madam Mayor, this is a really valuable site long term. We've tried, we've been to court, we've had a variety of discussions about it, and I stand also to support the officer's recommendations. This one is one of those wicked problems. As Councillor David said, it's been around for a long time, and we were hoping with the work that we were doing a year or so ago that it might lead to a conclusion that all the landholders in this particular area would be happy with, but the court has ruled and the arrangements that are in place now. Council, I think, has council officers have identified the only options open to council at this point in time. So I commend the officer recommendation to councillors.
Thank you, Councillor Hedditch. Any other speakers? Councillor Goodich.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I echo also Councillor Davids and Councillor Hedditch's comments. The last thing that I expected when I got back onto council was to see that Solomon Heights was still the problem that it was. Indeed, when I was on council before, and Councillor David as well, we learned about the Solomon Heights problem so to speak. And I was actually on the consultative committee, and I understand how terribly difficult it was to rally the landowners around and find a solution to this problem. Whilst what we have before us tonight, the recommendation, perhaps by a lot of landowners, may not look like a solution, however, it is a start, and I commend the officers for all their strategic work on this, because it really has been a very difficult site to work with in all aspects. So I will be supporting the recommendation and hope that in the near future we will find a solution to this problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Goodachie. Any other speakers for or against this report? Okay, I'll put it to a vote. Those in favour? Against? Carried. Item 12.9, Council Plan Action Plan 2019-2020 First Quarter Progress Report. May I ask Dan Hogan to please brief us on this? Thank you.
Thank you. Bit of a tongue twister, that title. This is another quarterly report to Council for the purpose of transparency, this time to ensure that the implementation of the Council plan through annual action is tracked and managed appropriately. The recommendation calls on Council to note the outcomes and forecasts for the first quarter reporting period. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Are there any questions or points of clarification? Do I have a mover for this report? Councillor Borg. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Farm. Councillor Borg, would you like to speak to this report?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. This is a highly comprehensive document which details the Year 3 Action Plan first quarter, July to September 2019. The Council Plan encompasses a vision for the community which guides Council's activities through its 4 strategic goals. The Progress Report provides results for the 113 actions in the Action Plan. One of the highlights for me is in relation to developing a community of lifelong learning. More specifically, a Memorandum of Understanding has been signed with Victoria University to design and deliver the course Skills Now for the Future. This course helps job seekers, career changers, or those struggling to advance their careers to identify and articulate learning achieved in informal environments such as work, volunteering, and community. The implementation of Year 2 Action Plan of the Youth Strategy, a number of actions occurred in this quarter, including, but not limited to, the funding was secured for from the Australian Government Regional Employment Trials Programme for Project Brimbank. And another highlight for me was the iHarvest, which Councillor Hedditch has already spoken about it earlier. And today we celebrated the 1-year birthday of the iHarvest, and from what we've heard, it's going really well. I commend this report to Council.
Thank you, Councillor Borg. Do I have any other speakers for this report? No. I'll put it to a vote. Those in favour? Against? Carried. 12.10. Draft Laneway Construction Policy 2019. Could I please ask the Director, Neil Whiteside, to present?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This report is for Council to consider adopting the draft Laneway Construction Policy 2019, which is at Attachment 1 to the report. The policy aims to establish a basis upon which Council will require developers to contribute to the amenity of the municipality by formally constructing a laneway that is used to provide vehicle access to the development. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Councillors, do I have any questions or points of clarification? Councillor Hedditch?
Just one, Madam Mayor. Mr. Whiteside, if the laneway is seen to be used in a beneficial way for residents, developers, whatever, what's the process that would happen? Would a developer come to Council and seek an exemption to use the lane?
Just for clarification, are you talking around in terms of the interpretation of this policy, or as a as a potential purchase of the laneway for their own use. So the policy really puts in place what's been custom and practice for many years. When developers seek to redevelop a site and perhaps look at using the laneway for their primary access, for vehicle access, often laneways are unconstructed, which will cause potential amenity issues if it's being used as the primary access. This policy really confirms the current custom practice that we would look to have them seal that laneway as part of that process.
Okay. Councillors, just a reminder to direct questions through the chair as well. Thank you. Any other questions or points of clarification? No? Okay. Do I have a mover?
Move, Madam Mayor, as printed in the business papers.
Thank you, Councillor Goodichere. Do I have a seconder? Councillor David. Would the mover like to speak?
Simply to say, Madam Mayor, I think these policy guidelines were actually quite necessary to aid developments which abut laneways. I know there have been a couple of developments that have come to us which have included laneways, and I think it's the policy is important to clarify those guidelines. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Goodichere. Councillor David?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I remember that we sold, or you offer, or rather offer, laneways to residents, and we sold, my memory serves me right, 3 or 4 in my time as lanes, which they use for their benefit. The reason behind it, a lot of people with adjoining to the laneways, they complain about rubbish and other ways and means. Unwanted people and all that type of thing. So when times comes and if this is coming before us, I think it should be supported, speaking to the residents if they so wish to purchase the land. And if so, an offer, let them purchase.
Thank you, Councillor David. Any other councillors like to speak? Councillor Hedditch?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I speak in support of the report and the officer recommendation. I just want to flag that as a person who abuts a laneway and sees what goes on up and down the laneways from day to day, that it's a very busy little place around in our residential growth zone. And I guess I also notice that there are a number of applications coming in for redevelopment of properties that abut that laneway. One of those properties has no front access, no side access or anything like that. The only access is through the laneway, and it's a couple in from the street. So I guess I think there's a real lot of merit in what's being put to us, but I think there will be times when council will need to think about how it operates in a very pragmatic way going forward. I support it fully, though. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hedditch. Any other speakers for this motion? I'll put it to a vote. Those in favour? Against? Carried. Item 12.11, Draft Climate Emergency Plan. Kelvin Walsh, could you please present a report on this? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The purpose of this report is for Council to consider endorsing the draft climate emergency plan for the purpose of community consultation. The draft plan, which is at attachment 1, provides background information about the climate science and risks and proposes a course of action based around a position statement and 5 themes of action. Taken together, the 5 themes outline an action agenda for Council to lead our community through the climate emergency. The officer recommendation is the Council endorses the draft plan for community consultation from tomorrow right through to the middle of February, and that following that, Council receives a further report outlining any submissions received on the draft emergency plan and presenting a final draft climate emergency plan for consideration.
Thank you, Kelvin. Any questions or points of clarification? Councillor Hedditch.
Just one through the chair, Madam Mayor. Mr. Walsh, the consultation period is from tomorrow through till the middle of February. Given that there'll be a lot of people away between that January period in particular, and post-Christmas. Has there any consideration been given to possibly extending that period of time?
Through the chair, this what we have proposed in the report is an extended period of time through to the middle of February. Sorry, I don't have before me kind of the number of weeks, but I do know that it is an extended period. If council were of a mind to amend the recommendation, then that of course could be accommodated. In being mindful about the summer vacation period, we have also been mindful of having something back into the chamber early in the new year, or in the first quarter of the new year, for council's consideration.
Thank you, Calvin. I do recall we did extend that.
Yeah, I was just wondering. Through the chair, I was just wondering whether an extension to the end of February would be more beneficial for most of the community, given school holidays and that.
Through the chair, I support that.
Yep. So we're making an amendment to the...
I'm just asking a question on that. I would like to propose that they'll eventually come to time.
Okay. Okay, so what will happen is once someone moves it, they can make an alternate motion and we'll take it from there. Okay, any other questions or points of clarification before we move on? None? Okay. Could I please have a mover? Councillor Trung, a seconder? Councillor Heddage. Councillor Trung, would you like to move this motion?
Yes, I moved it motion on the paper.
But with the amendment?
Yeah, to the end of the February.
So,
yeah.
Okay.
It's not a mayor.
Okay.
It's not an amendment.
We're just,
it's an alternative.
yeah, we're just checking the calendar. Instead of the 28th of February, could we make it on the 26th of February? So that will be an alternate motion. So could the mover just respond to that, please?
Yes, Madam Mayor, yes, I would like to move up to the 26th of February 2020.
Thank you. Could I have a seconder for the alternate motion? Councillor Heddage, thank you. Would the mover like to speak to the alternate motion?
Yes, Madam Mayor, it's the ultimate at the Chamber of the Sustainable Brimbank portfolio. I'm very pleased to speak to this report. The final draft climate emergency plan is very important and significant piece of work. In June this year, Council received a community petition to declare a climate emergency. The petition it requests Council undertake a number of actions to address this concern. In the response to the resolution of Council at the 25th of June 2019 ordinary meeting of Council, officers have prepared a comprehensive draft climate emergency plan including the position of the statement. The climate emergency is real urgent action. It requests to respond to this emergency. The climate emergency displayed in the part of the fast-growing global movement, and the draft plan it recognized that the community are looking for leadership on this issue. I understand that although any other council have also declared a climate emergency, Brimbank is leading the way in preparing a plan to respond to the emergency. I commend this report to the council.
Thank you, Councillor Trung. Councillor Heddage, would you like to speak to this report?
I would indeed, Madam Mayor, thank you. It's great to see this report coming forward after the Council endorsed a draft climate emergency plan being prepared not too long ago. I commend the officers for all the work they've done. This isn't an easy task, and at the time I note that there was some questioning about whether it was doable. And before us tonight, we have something that has been done with some rigour, and it is great to see it on the table and ready to go for community consultation. So I commend the officers for a great piece of work and a really deep dive into what's possible and what's been going on around different environments, not just in this state, but around the place generally. For me, I think this is one of the most significant plans the council will have on its table for many, many years to come, once it's finally developed and goes through a number of iterations over the 5-year period that's been proposed. The officers have had a hard look at what's needed. They've had a look at the themes that they think are suitable for our community, and we look forward to community feedback about how this plan might be eventually concluded. The issues for me, council only has a relatively small part of the emissions problem that's in this community, about 2%. The majority of it belongs in the private and not-for-profit sectors, and we need to encourage those sectors to come on board and to play their part in, I guess, addressing the climate emergency that's before us. There are many things that different businesses, different schools, different NGOs and so on can do. But first of all, they need to know that this plan has been developed and that they can make a contribution in their own way to it by joining up and creating that strong community voice with council. 1 minute left? Yeah, thank you. And I look forward to that process starting and that I guess groundswell of community support coming forward. It is so important, I think, that we as a council keep remembering our council commitment that we will act in the best interests of the Brimbank community and consider the immediate and long-term impacts of our decisions. This is one of them, and that we will make these decisions fairly and without bias. And this particular issue, climate emergency, can create enormous bias and impact for vulnerable communities. So I notice that the report bears that in mind and the actions are dealing with some of that as well. It's a whole of council report. It's a great document to see that all the different parts of council are coming together as one to make their contributions to it. So I thank the officers and directors for all, and the CEO for all the work that they've done to pull this together in this way. It gives us great hope for the future. Thank you again to everyone involved.
Thank you, Councillor. Just in time. Okay, do I have any other speakers? Councillor Tarkos.
Just to endorse what's already been said, but also I'd like to say that after receiving the petition in 2019 from our community, our council has undertaken a range of actions, and I am very proud that the fact that we consulted so widely. We talked to climate action groups, youth, secondary students, primary school students, seniors, elderly. We talked to a wide range of people, and our aim was to bring a wider understanding of what everybody felt about this climate emergency. Our aim is to bring emissions down to in accordance with the targets set by the nations in the 2015 Paris Agreement, which is to try and reduce global temperatures by 1.5 degrees Celsius. I fully endorse this council's commitment towards zero carbon emissions and acknowledge that although there's some budget allocation required for this, in the long run, we have to look at the benefits. To do nothing would bring a lot more risk to our communities. As we have read in the paper, we are starting to expect more 50-degree Celsius days in Melbourne as our planet is starting to heat up. The impact of this on our community and our sustainability and our health is immense. Council has a legislated duty under the Local Government Act and a duty of care. Today, there was an article in The Age on the call for leadership on this climate crisis. And I think people in New South Wales are looking to their leaders, their political leaders first, when such a tragic event is unfolding before them. They're saying that climate change is currently the biggest cause of anxiety, and people are looking, again, to leaders to lead them and give them support.
A minute, Councillor Tarkos.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, this has personally touched me because I have been in contact with a ward councillor colleague who at the moment in New South Wales faces losing their home, and this has become a very real threat to her family and to councillors in New South Wales. So this is the stark reality we now live in. Although we're in Victoria, this is happening in our neighbouring state. We need to do whatever we can to live sustainably, reduce emissions, and to, I commend the officer's recommendation to do what we can, and I am extremely happy that we are leading on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tarkos. Do I have any other speakers for this report? Okay, I'll put it to a vote. Those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. 12.12, final draft Deer Park Rail Corridor Urban Design Principles. Could I please ask our Director, Neil Whiteside, to briefly introduce this report?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Following council endorsement at the Ordinary Council meeting on the 17th September 2019, the draft Urban Design Principles were released for community and stakeholder consultation for a 4-week period ending the 18th of October. A summary of the issues raised in the submissions to the draft Urban Design Principles is at attachment 2 to the report, which also includes the Council Office considerations and recommendations. Overall, there was strong support for the draft Urban Design Principles and projects generally. This report is for Council to consider adopting the final draft Deer Park Rail Corridor Urban Design Principles, which is at attachment 1 to the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Are there any questions or points of clarification? No. Do I have a mover? Councillor David, a seconder. Councillor Farm. Councillor David, would you like to speak to this report?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As the Councillor for the Connecting Brimbank portfolio, in November 2018, Council was pleased to learn of the announcement of the 3 crossings removals at Dermot Road, Robinson's Road and Deer Park, and of course Vicroads Road at Deer along the Geelong and Ballarat lines. The removals are welcome news to Brimbank. The work also means that the construction of new Deer Park Station, what a wonderful thing. Very, very welcome announcement by the people concerned here. 10 key urban design principles have been prepared to guide and assist informed discussions and advocacy with the state government concerning the planning, design and delivery of all projects along the rail corridor. The principles also establish a consistent message from Council, and the draft Deer Park Corridor Urban Design Principles are endorsed by Council in September, and community consultation then occurred. And I was pleased to learn that there was a strong community support for the draft Urban Design Principles and for the projects in general. This is a significant and exciting project, Madam Mayor, and it'll be a welcome sort of significance to the whole western part of our city. So well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor David. Councillor Farm.
Thank you, Chair. Was another great example of, the work of the council and community together. Before this was announced by the Premier of Victoria, we actually worked with the community in that petition and handed it in to our state member. After that, working with community again in terms of consultation, and come out with some new principle that what the urban design principle should be under consultation with the community, what would they like to see or, having in that design. So I think at this point, just, can't be wait for that to happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Farm. Any other speakers for this report? Councillor Hedditch.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just briefly, support all that's been said before. These particular principles contain a number of great points. For me, I'm particularly keen on 8, creating a sustainable corridor and maximising greening and canopy cover opportunities in all built areas and encouraging additional tree planting in degraded areas whilst maintaining the integrity of local ecosystems is one in particular. I think it's the theme for the night for me. We've had the climate change report come through just a minute ago. We've had discussions about the importance of preventing heat island effect, and how good is it to see it in this particular set of design principles. For me, it's about joining the dots across council. As a councillor, we have to make our decisions, as we've said, fairly and without bias, and considering the best interests of the community in the immediate and longer terms. And this again gives us that opportunity to think about how this particular corridor might develop, how it might be enhanced, and how outcomes in various areas can be improved on from what they are today. I encourage councillors to continue to keep having this conversation about how we join the dots in the different parts of the council business and bring a set of, I guess, thoughts and decisions to the table, from the table, that enable this community to really advance in the years to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Hedditch. Any other speakers for or against this report? Okay, I'll put it to a vote. Those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. 12.13, Draft 2019 Community Flag Poll Policy. Could I please invite Director Dan Hogan to present the report? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The report before Council seeks adoption of the Draft 2019 Community Flag Policy as attached. The intent of the policy is for the orderly and appropriate flying of community flags when requested, acknowledging that Council must have particular regard to the Australian National Flag Protocols as issued by the Department of the Prime Minister and Cabinet. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Are there any questions or points of clarification? Excuse me. Do I have a mover for this? Councillor Farm. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Trung. Councillor Farm, would you like to speak to this motion?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. So we're talking about inclusive community, and of course we want our community to be proud of where they live, but also proud about their background or their culture or what they believe that they should celebrate on. And the culture flag, or bringing up this policy, will give the clear guideline for community who want to apply for their culture flag to be raised, and that's why I am supporting this report.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Farm. Councillor Trung.
Yeah, Madam Mayor. I think it's community platform is important for our community. Councillor Farm mentioned is we have a large member community with a different background, and it the policy like this is mainly council in carry and the support of the community and recognize and accept all their culture. But I think it does it when the community put the application to request for the blessing back. So we need to plan for them to really to make to understand the policy. So it encourage and support, and also to avoid it be misunderstood in the future. That's it. The one I recommend. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Trull. Any other speakers? Councillor Hedditch.
What a great policy. And what a great city Brimbank is with its fabulous multicultural community. Community flags are important. Culture is important. The Australian culture, however we define it, and the culture of all those people who've come to join our Aboriginal community over the years and create this country. It's important for people of many cultures to acknowledge and celebrate their backgrounds and the cultures they've come from. And I think, in my view, community flag polls enable that in a positive way for people to come together and to celebrate what has been and what now is in Brimbank and Victoria/Australia. So for me, I look forward to the adoption of community flag poles across Brimbank in 2 or 3 places, and an ongoing celebration of culture from the 160 nationalities that live here. It's fantastic.
Well said, thank you. Any other speakers for this report? Okay, I'll put it to a vote. Those in favour? Against? Carried. 12.14, submission to draft Melbourne Industrial and Commercial Land Use Plan 2019. Calvin Walsh, do you mind presenting this report, please?
Not at all, Madam Mayor. The purpose of this report is for Council to consider the submission to the draft Melbourne Industrial and Commercial Land Use Plan at Attachment 1. The draft submission to the Melbourne Industrial and Commercial Land Use Plan, it is proposed that Council give its in-principle support to the draft plan, including a range of further comments and information specific to the Brimbank context, and all of that is detailed in the submission. Council is asked to endorse the draft submission and to note it will be submitted to the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning.
Thank you, Kelvin. Are there any questions or points of clarification, councillors? No? Do I have a mover? Councillor Hedditch. A second? Thank you. A seconder? Councillor Farm? Councillor Hedditch, would you like to speak to this report?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I commend the report to councillors. Its aim is to establish a planning framework to enable state and local governments to better plan for future employment and industry needs. It's exactly what we need. The officers have done their job. They produced a really good report. Last Friday I went to a presentation by an academic from New South Wales who developed the Sydney Transport Plan and was down here to make a contribution and sort of a critique of the Melbourne Rail Plan that had been produced by the Rail Futures Institute. He was asked a question, what do you think about the Rail Futures Institute plan? And he mentioned that it was a very detailed transport plan, but from his point of view, transport wasn't Melbourne's biggest issue. It was land use planning. And I guess a number of people in the room had a nod of the head and a discussion about it, and there was general agreement about that. And I think this particular piece of work that the state government's commissioned and that the council is responding to aims to better plan for future employment and industry needs with better land use planning arrangements, and we can only commend that. So I commend this report to the councillors. Thank you.
Any other speakers for this report? Okay, I'll put this to a vote. Those in favour? Against? Carried. Councillors, that was the final officers' report. We moved next to item 14, notices of motion, rescission. There are no rescission motions this evening. Item 15, CO. Is there any urgent business? Thank you. There is no urgent business. Item 16, confidential report or confidential business. There is one item of confidential business this evening. May I have a mover of a motion to close the meeting to members of the public for the consideration of confidential report 16.1, which has been designated as confidential. Councillor Lancashire.
The recommendation to close the meeting.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Farm. I will put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Against? Carried. We will now close the meeting to members of the public. While we will reopen the meeting, I know that some people may choose to go home now, so I will take this opportunity to thank you for all attending and wish you a very happy festive season. The meeting is now closed to members of the public at 9:13. celebrate Christmas. Have a wonderful festive season and see you all in 2020. Thank you.
Thank you.
Meeting closed 9:39.